You know, some names, they belong to a specific time, a specific era. But then, there are names that feel like they belong to eternity. In that quiet, intense world of 64 squares, one of those names still echoes, and its power has never, ever faded.
But that name, it carries so much more than just the memory of victory. It carries the weight of a mind that saw the truth on a chessboard with a clarity that, well, it was almost divine. And at the same time, a personality that wrestled with a fury that bordered on madness. And that's really what this is. It's the story of a lone genius who took on an entire empire and won, only to find himself a king without a kingdom, haunted by the very gift that was supposed to make him immortal. So let's go back. His story doesn't start with a crown. It starts with a quiet obsession in a world that would eventually shrink and shrink until it was just the size of a chessboard. He and his sister Joan, they learned how to play from a simple set of instructions. But you know how it is with kids. She moved on to other things. Bobby, though, he just moved deeper and deeper in. Those 64 squares, they became his sanctuary, his entire universe. And his first games were played against the only opponent who could possibly match his fire, himself. His mom, Regina, she saw her son just disappearing into this solitary world. And of course she worried. But where she saw isolation, the masters at the local Brooklyn Chess Club, they saw something else entirely. They saw the clear, unmistakable signs of a prodigy. They took him in, they mentored him, and that quiet little spark of talent was about to become a raging fire. And that fire turned into a firestorm. The boy who played games against himself was now ready to take on the world. And let me tell you, the world was just not prepared for what was coming. Think about it. At an age when most of us are just trying to figure out high school, Bobby Fischer was dismantling the entire chess establishment. The titles just kept falling, one after another. Youngest ever junior champion at 13, youngest U.S. champion at 14, and then, at just 15 years old, the youngest grandmaster in history. This wasn't just a rise, it was a complete hostile takeover of the game. And then, he achieved pure perfection. The 1963-64 U.S. Championship. He didn't just win it. He did something that's basically impossible. 11 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws. A perfect score. It's a feat that has never, ever been repeated. The guys he beat could only shake their heads in wonder. I mean, listen to that. They weren't just losing a game. They were watching a level of genius so deep, so profound, that even other masters couldn't see what was happening right in front of them. On his way to the world title, his dominance became something just unheard of. He faced two of the world's absolute best, Soviet Grandmaster Mark Taimanov and Denmark's Bent Larsen. He didn't just beat them, he crushed them with perfect 6-0 scores. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. This wasn't a competition, this was a demolition. And so, this stage was set. But this wasn't just for a chess match. No, this was for a battle that was about to capture the imagination of the entire planet. So here we are in Reykjavik, Iceland, 1972. And this is so much more than black and white pieces on a board. This is East versus West. It's the lone American genius against the powerful state-sponsored Soviet chess machine. A symbolic victory for democracy itself felt like it was on the line. And in true Fischer fashion, his, let's call it a volatile temperament, almost wrecked the whole thing before it even started. He made all these demands, he protested cameras, he even forfeited the second game. The world title was slipping away. But his opponent, the champion, Boris Spassky, he showed this incredible grace. He refused to win by default. He actually gave in to Fischer's demands just to keep the match going. He wanted to face the genius, not win an empty title. And in doing so, he let history happen. Fischer became the world champion. He'd done it. He'd reached the absolute summit. The world was his. But the silence at the top of that mountain, it must have been deafening. Victory, as it turned out, was a much heavier burden than the climb. So after conquering the world, he just vanished. 3 years after that historic win, he simply refused to defend his title. For 20 years, the greatest chess player on the planet would not play a single competitive game. And that's it, isn't it? That's the great, haunting question of his life. Why would you fight so hard to claim the throne, and then just walk away? Well, for his title defense, he laid out his terms. They had to be his terms. He wanted a match format that he felt was the purest test of skill, A race to 10 wins. Draws mean nothing. But the International Chess Federation, FIDE, they rejected his final, crucial clause, that if it was tied 9-9, he'd keep the title. For Fischer, this was compromising the integrity of the match, and that was something he would not do. So he was faced with a choice: bend to the committee or give up his crown. He chose exile.
And so the final act began, the long, slow decline of a king who had given up his own throne. He became a wanderer in a world he didn't recognize anymore, in a world that didn't really recognize him either. He came back for one brief, controversial rematch in 1992. And you could see these flashes of the old brilliance. But 20 years, man, that's an eternity in chess. The world had moved on. There was a whole new generation of players now, players who grew up studying his games, using computers. The era was no longer his. His last years were really just marked by this deep paranoia and rage. He became a fugitive from his own country. His public statements got more and more shocking, and he died in Iceland, the very same place where he had his greatest triumph. He was 64 years old, 1 year for every square on the chessboard, a poetic and truly tragic end. You know, in the classic tragedies, the hero is always undone by his own nature. For Fischer, his tragic flaw was the very game he mastered. It was the source of all his glory, and it was the source of all his isolation. He loved it, and he feared it, until, in the end, the fear won. And yet, for all the darkness that came later, what he did on that board, it remains pure. He took a game of logic, a game of tactics, and through his genius, he turned it into something more. He turned it into art. Brilliant, troubled, unmatched. In the end, what we're left with are the immortal games, this haunting story, and the ghost of a king who ruled a world of 64 squares. And legends like him, they rarely come.